well-being. So people want to look better. You go to something like this, where people are hiding the smile, is very bad for them because the self-esteem is going down. So this is not a good idea to have bad teeth or badly looking teeth, because the smile is something very important for the whole personality, for the self-esteem of our patients, and this is why we need to give them something nice. You can see this looks very natural, but this is emax, right? This is an emax smile, and if you don't know that this is an artificial teeth or artificial veneers and crowns, you actually don't know. And this is exactly what we need to do. We need to copy nature to perfection. So this is very good. And the trend, why we should do metal-free, maybe all ceramic restorations, is they are minimally invasive, so we can reduce the amount of tooth tissue that we need to prepare, that we need to cut away. They're very aesthetic. They're also biocompatible, which means that the body can tolerate these materials good. And I would like to show you today a lot of studies. Most important is they are durable. So we want to, if we do our restorations, they should look good and they should also last in the patient's mouth. It would be very bad if the patient comes back to you and says, okay, here I have some pieces of your restoration. So this is not good. Yeah, we want to have something durable. At the end of the day, there's a high demand by patients for these kind of aesthetic restorations, which is very good for us because we can make a business. Yeah, we can increase the business, at the same time make the patient happy. All right. So regarding invasiveness, I would like to show to you that with today's modern ceramics, we can be less invasive, which is also important for the patient. So if you look at the amount of, in percent, that's in percent the amount of tooth tissue that we cut away with different inlay designs. Now if you look at crowns, you can see these numbers are very high. So if we do a full crown preparation, we're actually cutting away up to 73% of the tooth is just removed. Yeah, it's not so nice. But very often we have situations, clinical situations, where we still have a lot of sound tooth tissue. If you just think about failed amalgams or failed composite restorations, we still have a lot of sound tissue left that we can bond to. So if we look at onlay or partial crown preparations, we can see that the amount of tooth tissue that we need to cut away is much less compared to a crown preparation. So today, in my office, in my clinic, I'm only exchanging existing crowns. Most of the time, the restorations I'm doing is this kind of restoration because it's less invasive, but still looks good and is beautiful. And for anterior restoration, you can see the same picture. You can see more invasive for full crowns, but much less invasive for veneers. Look at veneers here. It's much less invasive compared to a full crown. Right? So it's good, because patients want veneers to look good. And we can give it to them, no problem. But sometimes, if you have only a little chipping on the incised edge here, for example, we can still do like a direct restoration. Also looks very good. Yeah? So we need to use all the tools that we have. Direct, aesthetic ceramics, indirect ceramics, and direct composites, both combination. So the ultimate goal is, of course, to have the least amount of tooth tissue that we are removing with the drill. Yeah, we want to be conservative. Yeah? So we know if we can cut less of the tooth, we have less sensitivity, we have less devital situation for the tooth, and we have less necrosis. Yeah? So we have less trauma to the tooth. So let's integrate this. We want to be aesthetic and we want to be less invasive. These are the two things that patients want. So let's give it to them. It's easy to do. And you can communicate it. You need to talk about this. And the patient will realize, wow, this is a great dentist. Okay? So, and of course there is a scientific base for this. For example, this is like a study have been done looking back. So patients have been treated with metal ceramic crowns and bridges, and then many years later, the study has looked at how many of the teeth that have been prepared become devital, right? So you can see with crowns, after 10 years, all of these prepared teeth, 15.6% of the prepared teeth became devital. After 15 years, 19%. And for bridges, after 10 years, 29%. And after 15 years is 34%. So you can see a lot of these teeth become devital. And devital teeth, of course, we can do endodontic treatment. But the long-term prognosis for these teeth is much worse compared to a vital tooth. Okay? So this is why we should need to take care that we can keep the teeth vital. It's very important for the long-term prognosis of these teeth. But of course you can see this is PFM. PFM requires much more space. So you have a metal framework and the dental technician needs to do space for the layering or for the veneering ceramic on the top. And that's why you need to prepare more. So this is the picture I would like to convey to my patients. My patients should feel good when they come into my dental clinic, and they should know that they will receive the least amount of preparation. So I'm focusing on minimally invasive and aesthetic dentistry, both of them. So now I would like to show you this picture. This is not my case. It's a case from the US, from America, right? So the patient here required to have the central diastema and the lateral diastema to be closed. Okay? And you can see the teeth have no restorations and no caries, no decay. So the question is, what is the treatment option? So, would anybody go for crown preparation here? Crown? No? Veneer? But it depends on what kind of veneer, yeah? So today we also can do non-prep veneer, but in this case the dentist did like a very aggressive preparation, you can see. This is not necessary, because here you're cutting into dentin. So it's not necessary to cut all the teeth down. Yeah, so if I was the patient, I would not be so happy, because this is too aggressive, too invasive treatment. Yeah. So always when we talk about diastema closure, we can also think about direct composite. Yeah, it's possible. Don't worry. So for example, I had this patient, young patient, and she was still in the education. So she didn't have so much money. And she also didn't want to have orthodontic treatment. So in this case, we decided to go for direct composites to close all these diastema and also to change the gold proportion, right? Because if you just go ahead and close this diastema, the width of these centrals become too wide, too large, right? You will look like a rabbit. So we want to have an even distribution of the tooth width so it looks more natural. So that's why I did a wax up. I also need to correct the wrong axis of the centrals. And did this wax up, and based on the gold proportion, as you can see here, you can see there is a certain ratio of the tooth width from the central to the lateral to the canine, decreasing tooth width. So if we focus on this, we consider this harmonic. and aesthetic. And based on this, you can see I did a little bit of preparation on the centrals here, a little bit of preparation to get more space for the laterals. And then of course I took from this situation, from the wax up, I took a silicone key, right? A palatal silicone key as a guide when the patient comes into the office. And you can see with this silicone template, I then just built up all the teeth here. You can see. And there's some composite materials which are very aesthetic. So this one is called Empress Direct, IPS Empress Direct, which is a very highly aesthetic composite that you can use for these anterior aesthetic cases. You can see here. So now we go from here to here. Yeah. So it's a relatively low invasiveness. You can see. And the situation is it's cost effective for the patient and not so invasive for the patient, yeah? Because the patient is still young, still when maybe in 10 or 20 years we can still go ahead with some ceramic veneers, but for the time being this is a good situation for her and she was very happy with this. You can see this is before and after, and she was quite happy with this treatment. So we need to use all the tools that we have. Now you can see a situation like this, old defective amalgam. Very often you have clasps which are still okay, yeah? Still intact. So you don't need to really do a crown preparation here. We can actually just remove the defective filling and the decay, and then you have a good situation like this, right? So, of course, we built this up a little bit here, this defect, and then you can see the preparation here, and this all sound enamel all around that we can easily isolate, right? So, it's non-retentive, so you need to bond it. So, this restoration needs to be adhesively bonded. It's conservative because we just remove the defect. It's supragingival, so we can easily isolate it during the cementation procedure. So very easy. And you can see after restoration, it's very difficult to know where the restoration is because the material blends in very nicely with the surrounding tooth. So this is a glass ceramic. It's not so strong. You know, sometimes you don't need the strongest material. For example, like this one, an inlay or overlay, you can use even like a weaker glass ceramic. So this one is not emax. Yeah, emax very strong. But this one is Empress, right? Empress glass ceramic. But it's working well if it is bonded together with the tooth. All right. So I would like to show you all the different aesthetic materials that we have today. So what you have just seen in this case was IPS Empress, is a lucite reinforced glass ceramic. There's also some feldspathic porcelain available. And then we have some ceramic and composite mix. So for example, this one would be the hybrid ceramic. Yeah, it's a feldspar infused with some resin. Then we have some composite materials also today that we can use. And a step further in the strength would be that we have like materials, glass ceramic, that have special crystals inside to make them even stronger. So we have something like zirconia reinforced lithium silicate, and this one is lithium disilicate. This one is the famous emax. And finally, we have even stronger materials like zirconium oxide, zirconium dioxide materials that you can see here. So there's a lot of materials in this category available. So now these materials have very different strength and very different aesthetic appearance, right? So you can see here, they have different aesthetics, they have different translucency, they have different strength, that means different indication, and they are very different because some of the materials are very new So you don't know exactly how they will behave in the patient's mouth after 20 years. And some other materials like emax are very well proven. So we can look back of more than 16 years of clinical documentation. You know what I mean? Okay, so I would like to show you some of these materials in detail. So at the end of the day, for aesthetics, it's important because we need to reproduce the tooth, right? We need to reproduce both the dentine and the enamel of the patient's tooth in different indications, anterior and posterior, right? So of course, we need to talk about different translucency levels, right? Okay, so now the question is, what makes all ceramic materials really aesthetic? What is it? What kind of factors are important? And you can see some of the important things we need to look at is the translucency. Yeah? Different kind of levels of translucency are necessary in our material. Then we need to use opalescence is important, especially for anteriors. Opalescent effect. And fluorescence is also nice. So I would go through these little factors step by step. So this is actually an interesting study to show what is the difference in the translucency, especially in the anteriors. So on the left-hand side you can see a framework for PFM, so it's a metal framework. Then in the middle you see zirconia framework, and you can see here glass ceramic like emax framework. Okay? So now if we bring the light from the palatal side, we can see how much of the light will go through these frameworks. And here, of course, PFM, that's the biggest disadvantage of PFM is that the light is completely blocked. Yeah, the light cannot go through the metal. And for the zirconia, you can see it's better, yeah, but still quite opaque here. Still not too much light going through that framework. And much better is the glass ceramic, yeah? Because with the glassy matrix, the light can go through the glassy matrix much better, so we have a better light distribution here. But of course, these are only frameworks, so now the dental technician is doing a layering ceramic on the top, and the situation looks like this. PFM, the light can only go through here, through the incised area where the layering ceramic is. And the same thing here, layering ceramic, you can see it's more translucent than the zirconia framework. And now here you have a better situation with the emax, press emax, because you have better light distribution. So for aesthetics, we can conclude that we're getting more close to nature with glass ceramics when it comes to aesthetics, okay, and light transmission. So you can see this one is the natural tooth, and this one is the glass ceramic, and this is how it looks like, okay, so this one, the natural tooth, this one is emax. You can see it has been done with a so-called cut-back technique. So this is the pressed framework, and this one is the layering ceramic on the top. So this looks very almost perfect. If you don't know which is which, it looks like nature, yeah? Okay. So we want to have the same, this natural tooth, you can see here, we want to have the same light interaction within our glass ceramics. So, to conclude, glass ceramics have the best aesthetic potential. And you can see these are all natural teeth, and our patients are very different. They are very different, you know. For example, we have very young teeth. You can see very opalescent and translucent inside the edge. And as the patient is getting older, the patient has more wear, more abrasion, so the enamel is getting abraded, and then you can see all these characteristics are getting lost. So the challenge for us in the clinic is we need to match the existing dentition of every patient, not only of certain patients. So this is why it's important that in our ceramic system we can match the translucency level to the patient. So we need not only one or two different translucency, we need many different translucency, right? Because the patient is so different. So you can see these are veneers made from different translucency levels. So this one is high translucency, medium translucency, low translucency, and special ingots for young teeth, because they are very opalescent, as you can see. All right, so this is the good thing here. This is a case of a patient that looks unnatural, right? I think everybody can see this is no natural smile. Why? Because the light cannot go through these restorations. You can see these are PFM. It looks very opaque, very unnatural. You look at the gums, look at the papillas. They are very dark and bluish. So they look not healthy, right? Because the light of the framework is blocked. The light is blocked by the metal framework. So if we change this to emax, we can see that the light really goes through these restorations and also go inside the gums. So that's what we call red aesthetics. And that's important because overall it looks more natural. So now the big advantage of glass ceramics is, like emax for example, that the light can really go inside the restoration and then spread into the gum area. It's more like a natural tooth compared to a PFM. Good, so this is how opalescence works. You know what opalescence is? If this is one thick piece of enamel and the light comes from this direction, so the light goes onto the enamel, and the enamel works like a filter, okay? So the light goes through the enamel, but not all the wavelengths. Only the lower wavelengths, such as orange and amber, will pass through the enamel, but the lower wavelengths, for example the bluish wavelengths, will be reflected. So this is natural opalescence. So let me just show you this on a cross-section of a molar. Look at the enamel. You can see if the light comes from your direction and is going onto the tooth, onto the enamel, you can see that bluish reflection. Okay, so it looks bluish on a black background. And if you can bring the light from behind the screen, so that's what we call transmitted light, then the same enamel is exactly the same enamel, looks very different, because now you can see the transmitted orange or amber proportion of the light. Okay? So this is a very natural effect of enamel, and we also would like to have this property in the ceramic, because only then we can copy nature. So now you can see here two veneers which are very, very thin, 0.3 millimeters only. So these are pressed emax veneers with a special ingot. It's called impulse ingot. And so there is actually no real shade. So you cannot say it's an A1 or A2 shade, but it's no color. It's just opalescence and translucency. So that material of this ingot is very suitable to restore young teeth, because young teeth have a high level of opalescence, and with this one here, the impulse ingot, we can copy nature. So the third property of aesthetic material is fluorescent. And you know that if we subject the natural tooth to ultraviolet light, it will emit visible light. So it would be good also to copy the same fluorescence of the natural tooth with our material. Okay, so these are the three desired properties of all ceramics that we would like to have. So we would like to have natural fluorescence, opalescence. You can see this opalescence here, bluish opalescence. And it's very important that we have a different range of different translucency levels so that we can match any patient that walks into our office. Good. So now we talked about aesthetics. And I would like to show you more cases with aesthetic restorations. But the other thing is, what about the strength of the ceramics? Because if the ceramic is fracturing after 1 year, the patient will be angry and will come back on us. So we need to have something, material that is very stable and is not fracturing. So now, if you look at metal, if we place a piece of metal on 2 points and we load it from the top, we can do this many times. So we can bend it, deform it, put it back, deform it. We can do this many times without a fracture. Because metals are kind of pliable, right? They are not brittle materials. As opposed to this ceramics, they are brittle materials. So if we load them, same thing, and we load them from the top, they cannot bend. They are not elastic, okay? So they can fracture more easily. But we can still use these materials, but we need to use it correctly in the daily clinic. Okay, so we can consider ceramic materials kind of fragile materials. It's not that bad like raw eggs, but we need to be careful. And you know that if you compress materials, okay, let's say I have this remote control and I place it and I load it from the top, it's no problem. But if I have it like this, you can see one part is supported, the other one is not supported here. If I load it from here, I will not have compressive forces, I will have tensile forces. And this is how ceramic materials are susceptible to tensile forces, because when you have tensile forces, they can fracture more easily. All right, so when we look at all the materials that we have just talked about, we look at the strength now. Is very different, okay? You can see one of the things is important is the flexural strength. You can see here the feldspar materials and lucite materials are more weak. So they're only between 150 and 185 megapascals of flexural strength. And on the other hand, on the other side, we have the zirconia materials which are very strong, up to 1,200 megapascals. Yeah. So that's the other extreme, right? And so you can see here, emax, for example, is in the range of 500 megapascals. So it's already much stronger than the previous materials here, but not yet as strong as the stronger zirconia materials. Okay. So there's another figure called fracture toughness, and you can see the same order: low fracture toughness for the feldspar and the weaker glass ceramics, and very high value for zirconium oxide materials, more than 5.1. So because of the difference here in the strength values, you can also see a different indication range. So with the weaker materials, you can only do single tooth restorations, and preferably this will be inlays and onlays and some veneers. Whereas with the very strong materials, like zirconia, you can also do molar bridges, right? Molar bridges you can do, yeah, no problem. So I will show you the differences here within the materials a little bit later. So let's start with zirconia. So who is using zirconia? Can you give me a sign? Who is using zirconia? Only one. You're not using zirconia? Don't be shy, okay? You can tell me, it's no problem. I will not tell anybody, okay? Good. So zirconia, of course, today, zirconia is a big trend also, right? Zirconia is white and metal-free and strong. So these are the things here, right? So why is it very strong? I told you, it's biocompatible, metal-free. It's white or tooth color, depends on what you look at. The question is about aesthetics. Is it the best option for aesthetics? Maybe not, right? So it depends on where we use it. If you use it in posterior, it's maybe not so much a problem. If you use it in anteriors, could be, there are better options for anteriors. Yeah? So let's have a look on zirconia. So why is zirconia so strong? There's a special mechanism which is responsible for the high strength of zirconia. It's called the toughening transformation. So now you can see these little structures here. These are polycrystals, zirconia polycrystals, and originally they are in a tetragonal shape. Okay? So now when we have a crack here, there's a little crack you can see. So the crack is inducing stress into the material, right? So now, along this crack tip, these tetragonal crystals can change. This can change into monoclinic, okay? So now if the tip is propagating through the material, you can see these tetragonal polycrystals change into monoclinic, and the monoclinic crystals are larger than the tetragonal crystals. So now we have a volume increase of 4.5%. So the volume of the monoclinic crystals is larger than the volume of the tetragonal ones, and that's why the crack is stopped. The crack is compressed. So the crack cannot go further through, so we don't have a fracture. So this explains the much higher strength of zirconia compared to glass ceramics. Okay? Good. So, of course, if you have a stronger material, the stronger the ceramic is, the less is the minimum thickness of the restoration. So that's one of the advantages of zirconia, of the strong zirconia, is that we can reduce the amount of thickness. So we can achieve less invasive restorations because we don't need to cut so much of the tooth. Okay? So in the case of, this was a material from Ivoclar, it's called emax Circat LT. So the minimum thickness for a posterior crown is only 0.6 millimeters, and for the anterior crown is only 0.4 millimeters. So that's really thin restoration, right? Okay, so zirconia can be processed usually in the lab. So the lab technician is usually using the discs, right? So the disc, and then the restoration is milled from the disc. And of course now for chairside CAD/CAM dentists, this material is also available as a block. We can put it to a CEREC system, for example. But now you can see this material does not have yet the final strength. Because if we have a strong material, we cannot mill it easily. So we need to have it in a pre-sintered stage. So it's not so strong yet. So we can easily mill it. And then later on, we need to sinter it in a special furnace at a very high temperature to have the final strength of the restoration. All right. So when we do it, let's say if we mill this restoration, it will be too large. It's about 22% too large. Because during the sintering, it will shrink by exactly 22%. So now in this stage, the crown is very fragile. If you drop it on the floor, it will fracture. It's like chalky, yeah? It will fracture. So now we need to bring this into a furnace, a sintering furnace. So at around 1,500 degrees for a bit more than half an hour. And then during that stage, the material, this crown, becomes very strong. And also, you can see it's changing also the color. It becomes tooth colored. Yeah? Okay, now we have a final strength of 1,200 megapascals. So this is how it works. Yeah, all zirconia needs to be milled first, and then it needs to be put into a sintering furnace to get the final strength, and it will shrink. So this one is smaller than this. That's why with a pre-sintered, before sintering, you cannot do a dry-in, because the crown will not fit. It's too large, right? Okay, so you can see now, today we talk about monolithic. So monolithic means there is no layering ceramic on the top. Previously, the dental technician did a layering ceramic on the top, but then we saw a lot of chippings in the layering ceramic, and today the trend is to have monolithic zirconia. And the good thing is with zirconia we can do long, like we can do molar bridges, yeah? So this is a good thing. Like this. You can see how it looks like, molar bridges with a strong material. This is another indication which I think is very interesting. You can see this is an inlay bridge. You can see this is a standard crown, but here the mesial abutment is only an inlay. Because there was a pre-existing composite which I just have to exchange, and I don't need to prepare the whole tooth here. So it's more conservative preparation. And this looks good. Yeah, you can see here from a lateral aspect and here, so it's okay. And one of the very nice indication is a cantilever bridge. You do sometimes have patients, young patients, that have like a missing lateral, but you cannot place an implant because the patient is still growing, the jaw is still growing, and you don't want to give him like a removable denture or like a temporary denture because the patient wants to look good. You can give him a cantilever bridge, like a Maryland bridge. You know, remember Maryland bridge? That was made out of metal. But of course metal, you know, doesn't look so good. So today we can do the same thing. And this is a study looking at 10-year outcome of zirconia cantilever bridge for this indication. Yeah? So this is how it works. Yeah? You can see this one is the abutment tooth and the missing lateral. You can see a little bit of a preparation here. And these are the bridges. You can see here two one-wing cantilever bridges, yeah, to replace the laterals. This is very conservative, yeah? But the outcome is still very successful. And by the way, one-wing container, much more successful than two-wing container. Okay? So don't put a container here. Only one is fine. It's better outcome. It has been researched. And you can see after 10 years, the survival rate is 98%. Very good. You can see after 10 years, 98% success rate. Very good success. So some of the indication, you need to use zirconia because you cannot do it with other ceramic material. So this is one of the indications which is, I think, very good. The problem is now with aesthetics, right? It's always the same thing. Strength and aesthetics. Sometimes, difficult to balance. So the zirconia of ceramic, you know, we don't have a glassy matrix with the zirconia. We have only polycrystals, no glassy matrix. And you can see when the light goes into the material, some of them will be reflected, but inside the material, on these grain boundaries, the light is reflected, you know, is refracted many times. So we don't have so much light going through the material. And this is why usually zirconia looks much more opaque compared to glass ceramics where we have a glassy matrix. Okay? So one of the shortcomings of zirconia is that they are more opaque compared to glass ceramics. You can see here now, this crown, the smaller crown here, yeah, you can see it looks a bit opaque, especially from the occlusal. You can see this is the natural neighboring tooth with the enamel. It's more translucent also here, but the crown really sticks out. Yeah, it really looks like very whitish. Even the color is actually okay. The color selection was okay.